Welcome to my post-MSI 2017 vlog, and today I wanted to talk about how the event went, G2, and why SKT T1 won MSI 2017. So let me start with just a quick update on the post-group stages. So I already did an update vlog before about the group stages, and now I wanted to talk about post-group stages, so essentially the World Elite match and the SKT T1 match. So going into World Elite, we were doing pretty well in training, and I don't think that we were necessarily optimistic, but we certainly felt like we had to prove something or die trying. So we knew that, at the very least, we were going to be putting everything that we possibly could into the game, and luckily we had like 3 days to try out a bunch of new meta picks that we'd kind of seen active through in the group stages. And one of the benefits that we had coming into MSI was that we boot camped here during the play-in stages, and so we got to scrim and adjust to jet lag. But one of the flaws was that for every team, actually, we didn't really get to scrim during the group stages. So if you went into group stage with a wrong read on the meta, you were stuck with it, right? Because you couldn't necessarily train a whole bunch of new matches or a whole bunch of new comps on the fly because you couldn't scrim. The games are structured in a way such that there weren't really opponents to scrim. I mean, Riot really loved us, and so we got I'm saying metaphorically, it was just luck, right? We ended up with a decent schedule, so we had 3 days that we could actually scrim another team a couple games, but most teams were playing either too late or too early, or their opponents that they would want to scrim, they would be playing the next day, so they couldn't scrim the teams that were free at that time, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really cockamamie in terms of the scheduling for scrimmages during the group stages. So in other words, if you came in with a certain read and it turned out to be wrong, you were really in trouble. And luckily for us, we got to practice some new picks, in between the group stages and the semifinals. And then the funny thing was we ended up picking some stuff that we never even trained, which some players in the roster weren't very happy about, but they were satisfied with their performances, and that went really well. So the World Elite games, essentially we just went out there and we played League of Legends. We just played straight up the best that we could. We didn't prepare any special cheese strategy or cheese comps. We looked at what they played. We looked at what we played. We said, this is what we've been training all split in terms of our macro. This is who we are. Let's go out and play. And it turned out we were just way better than them. I sensed this throughout the week. I was watching WE play, and I was sensing a lack of discipline. To me, they felt a lot like KT Rolster, but without a Korean infrastructure. So you have a bunch of talented players that are really aggressive and really want to show off on the Rift, but then they don't have a coach. They don't have a coach who's reining them in and saying, okay, now don't dive the turret, go do this dragon. Or don't dive 2 turrets deep on middle inhibitor, go take Baron. That kind of stuff. And I think that they had pretty choreographed team fights. I think they're pretty good in terms of using their champions together, which is a byproduct of just being good at the game. But it felt to me like I didn't want my team to lose to a team that didn't seem as disciplined about how they train or about maybe how they approach the game. And so it felt really satisfying for me to see the guys who put in so much work in terms of, reining themselves in practice, forcing themselves to consider the objective, going through all of the steps for Vision, even though we could abuse H2K and Unicorns of Love all day long and skip all these steps for Vision, still going through them, even though they weren't necessary, just so that we knew that when we got on the international stage, we would have those steps down, for the objective control. And so I felt very happy and proud for the players that the work that they had put in that way panned out, and they were actually just a better team because of the discipline of their training. And then we went home and celebrated, obviously, after making it to the finals, and we started talking SKT T1 drafts. And honestly, drafting against World Elite was way harder. Drafting against SKT, we basically, we saw what they were going to play. They saw what we were going to play. We knew kind of what the bans were. We knew what the strengths and weaknesses were. And I feel like both coaches kind of just shook hands and were like, yeah, this is basically what we're going to ban. And there were maybe a few, curveballs and one adaptation in Game 4 thrown in. But otherwise, it felt like we didn't get heavily disadvantaged in draft the way that we did a lot in group stages and the way that we did a little bit in World Elite. So I was really excited just to see that we got to play, League of Legends against SKT T1 and didn't just get dumpstered in the draft stage and have to climb back up from a hole, that we dug for ourselves. So from the outset of planning for the draft, that felt okay. And then we got into the games, and I told the players basically that they were in an underdog mindset, which is a really good mindset for competition. Understanding that you have nothing to lose and everything to gain, and that you can only go out and prove yourself is a really freeing kind of thing. You can be as aggressive as you want, and you can take risks that you otherwise wouldn't take. You can risk losing face because you have no face to lose in an effort to attain glory. Fantastic, right? But the danger in that is that if you don't actually believe that you can win the game, then what will happen is you will play over-aggressive. You'll be like, oh, we're not good enough to win normally, so we have to take extra risks to get medium to high reward in order to close out the game. So it was important in my preparation for the day that I talk to them about the things that I had seen in their scrimmages, where I had seen the macro game, in comparison to SKT, in a very balanced way. That a lot of the moves that they were doing, we were doing. A lot of the moves that we were doing, they were doing. Sometimes we'd end up there faster, sometimes they'd end up there faster. But it wasn't like the things we were doing were fundamentally different. And so just being able to tell the guys, that we can play our game of League of Legends and that we can put it on the table against their game and the better players will win at the end. I think, I said that. I'm not sure that they believed it, but then certainly after the first game and certainly after the second game, they knew that we had reached at least where SKT is right now in terms of fundamental understanding of the game. So by that I mean sometimes when I scrim SKT, it's like we don't even know how we lost, right? And I'm talking kind of about some scrims I've had with them in 2016, and sometimes when we scrimmed, not Rocks, because Rocks has had a really straightforward kind of just overwhelm you playstyle, but like Flash Wolves at IEM, when we play the game and we get to the end and we're like, okay, we had an advantage and then they just won. What happened, right? It didn't feel like that anymore in the training, because it felt like all of the chess pieces, it felt like we were playing chess. In other words, like we could see all their pieces and they could see all their pieces, and we knew what moves they had and we knew what the moves were. And unfortunately, they were better at those moves. But it wasn't like playing four-dimensional chess where half the moves are in a different dimension and you don't even know what the hell is going on. So to me, two takeaways from that. Number one, I hope that they don't level up 5 times from now to Worlds, because we're going to be watching, LCK a lot and trying to pick it apart and make sure that they don't uncover a whole new layer of the game that we just don't understand in Europe. Hopefully that we all keep playing chess and they don't move on to Ogleblocker or whatever the game is beyond chess that we don't know about. So that's number one. And number two, I think EU LCS is really in trouble. I don't think that, from the experience that this roster got here and the coaching staff, and then taking it into EU LCS, I don't know. There were certainly no teams that were committed to catching up with us in the spring split. There were no teams that were training in a way where they actually wanted to challenge us and challenge the world until Unicorns of Love went to IEM. They came back and they started treating scrimmages with a lot more purpose behind the moves they were making on the map. Now they've gone to Korea. I was paying attention to their management and their executives at Hamburg when they lost in the finals. They looked very serious about taking the team to the next level, and they were having a lot of really nice talks, and they've kept the same roster also, and I think they've kept the same coaching staff. So it really feels like, right, because it's sheepy, right, I think. So it really feels like they're committed to leveling up, and maybe they will try to download from us, what we're downloading from this event in terms of our own growth. So I feel optimistic that the EU LCS might level up off this, but I also think it's going to be a challenge for them to catch up, and I look forward to seeing how Joey and I and Chris can find a way for us to keep improving at a rapid pace in the EU LCS and keep pushing. I think there are a lot of benefits to the scrimmages we get in EU LCS. There's an insane amount of talent in the scene in terms of laning and aggression and top lane and top map play and crazy picks and really high pressure situations, and you get set behind a lot because of all the counter picks in the meta, and it's a really great environment to test reserve and test comeback potential and to be disciplined about that. And I really hope that it levels up even more. One of the problems I think that we ran into with Unicorns of Love on stage was that they, in scrims, played this very aggressive style that made us learn over and over again how to not lose early against them, because they would just counterpick our lanes and massacre us in these fights and skirmishes and pressure us everywhere on the map, and we would just be like holding back a tide. And then on stage, they would try to play this more reserved kind of macro game, and they weren't as finessed about it. And so I don't think it's possible that they withdraw their sword in the scrims and go into this very passive kind of play style. I think it's more likely in scrims that everybody's pushing a little bit more and everybody's testing their limits, and I hope that stays the case, because I think that is one of the advantages Europe has, is that because so many teams are so aggressive and testing their limits and really pushing the limits of what counter picks and like single lane carries can do, we get a lot of resilience training against that. And I think that I'm optimistic about G2 next split. I'm optimistic about our training next split. I think the team tasted this very bittersweet loss that felt like, if I only had that extra gear to give in Game 1, in Game 3, maybe not in Game 4, in Game 1 and Game 3, we would have gotten this. We would have bagged it. And I think that taste, we need to keep it alive. We need to keep it in our mouths, going through the split, and remind ourselves why we're training harder and why we're training more aggressively and why we're training with more discipline in our build-up to our attempt to qualify for Worlds. And I say attempt to qualify for Worlds because I'm a big believer in facing the step that's directly in front of you and surmounting that. And planning is if you're playing for the long haul and looking directly in front of you. I think people who look at the middle ground lose sight of too much stuff. If you look above the first step that's right in front of you and below your massive ultimate goal, then you just get into really troubled mental and tactical, visionary waters. So you should always understand where you're going. You want to win the world championship. You got to take steps in a certain progression to get there, but you need to look at the very next step you're taking and why, and accomplish that first. So if you ever see a coach or a player or somebody talking about, we're focused on Worlds and seeing how well we can do in group stages, first of all, they haven't even qualified, so they're not looking close enough. And secondly, if they're looking to get out of group stages, they're not looking high enough, so they probably won't even get to the point where they're challenging for that goal. Because they're not aiming to be the best, and therefore teams that are aiming to be the best might not get there, but they will get farther than the team that's aiming to just slightly overachieve themselves will. Yeah, so that's my take on that. Hi everybody, thanks for checking out my vlog, and please make sure to subscribe and share this with people that you think might like it, and check out my Mac program, mindgames.gg/MAC. I will see you next time.